Alright, out again. Try again, see if I can get some piece of my normal life back again. So, extremely hot weather we're having here, humidity and such and whatnot. So, yeah, it might do me in. But anyway, so building on the anaconda value subject again. Um, it's obviously this is the most important subject in the universe. Figuring out the gameplay, figuring out if our losses are worth our gains, figuring out whether it's a game worth playing. It's just you can't get more important than this kind of stuff. We have through time figured out some things to be preposterously unprofitable, in a sense that the gain wasn't worth the pain, like slavery and subjugation of different varieties, women even, the quality of their lives so substantially suppressed and diminished. These determinations of child labor, you can even go. We figured out that this is not worth it. That whatever profit you're gleaning it not only unethically, in the sense that if there is value gleaned, it's not being proportionally applied. All the negative is being, dumped on a one group, and all the positive is being dumped on another group, and therefore it's just invalid. Or we figure out that even just in an absolute sense, regardless of who benefits, it's just stupid. It's not profitable. Like drunk driving, just not even close to profitable. The minor inconvenience of having your liberty to drive versus, suspended, your liberty to drive suspended, versus, somebody being horribly killed on the road, slowly bleeding out and dying, because you can't competently perform the task anymore. Obviously, there's no other interpretation but that drinking and driving is stupid. It's a silly pleasure, a silly privilege gained at, a preposterously high negative price, negative imposition. And so we figure those things out. And those rational equations are solid, rock solid. There's no doubt about it. These are things we have through the progress of time had time to think about a few times and say, gee, here's the right answer. This is bad for us. Let's just declare it bad for us. So there are a whole bunch of things that we probably have put in that category. There are some recreational activities that I think are probably you can't do. I can't think of the list right now, but they're probably on there. If somebody comes up with a trend of, bungee jumping, using, invisible bungee strings, or some kind of, something that was just, going to have a very tiny likelihood of success and a very high likelihood of failure. We probably as a society would say, no, you really shouldn't. You can't really do that. You have to have a permit or a license. Yeah, that's it. We license things. We force people to have some sort of professional competence. Some sort of, not even professional, but some level of competence to have the privilege. Because we recognize there's this huge room for just preposterously failing. So we regulate a whole bunch of stuff too. Chemical plants or this or that to prevent them from being reckless and stupid and not paying attention to the rational value equation, not the irrational one. So, we don't let them do something based on their selfishness we force them to conform their behavior to the idea that it's not about what you want, like a huge profit. It's about public safety and all this other crap. And we got to have some assurance that you're going to perform this task in some way that's not going to, with a high probability, negative impact on the public welfare. So we've recognized this idea that that even small minorities, we've recognized their value. So I've used the example of a nuclear power plant. It's a good example. It's basically an in your backyard problem. It's a minority of people who will be catastrophically harmed, usually, in most scenarios, and while the majority sucks its pleasure of cheaper fuel. And we've already set that balance, though, and said, look, you can't be this reckless. You have to be only this reckless. At least we've confined the level of recklessness and, attempted to keep the catastrophe to some sort of reasonable minimum. Somebody's up here fiddling around in my park. They should have a right to do that. It degrades my experience. Damn people. How dare they degrade my personal experience? Why should they, as the masses, gain a bounty of comfort and joy that somehow degrades my experience? Anyway, so I'm just saying this is the way you have to understand these calculations, is that people have their personal attachments, their personal motivations, and that there's a bigger picture that's not about a personal attachment or a personal motivation. I don't know, it's some sort of bicycle race. I don't know. How you doing?
How are you?
Hey.
Where is it?
I guess moving on. You're piled up. Waiting for something to cross the road or something? I don't know. Anyway, whatever. They decide to stop in the middle of nowhere. I don't know. Not very talkative either. But whatever. Humans, kind of queer animals. So anyway, where was I? It's really, bicycling on it's just not a good idea. If you're male, unless you have one hell of a good seat. It's just stupid. So there's another one of these equations. They gain joy doing it, but if they looked at the real statistics, the number of impotencies caused, they'd realize, this is behavior I shouldn't conduct myself in. There's huge downside risk, and for this minor pleasure of riding in a natural path that is brutally treacherous to my physical anatomy. Look at roots everywhere, rocks. Maybe if you have a really good shock absorber, I don't know. Still a really bad idea. Anyway, a lot of, just important veins and stuff go through that area that you sit on, and bash it to pieces. You're just going to break your shit. Anyway, it's proven. Anyway, so that's sort of the point here, though, is that we can look at all these activities in objective ways where we're not personally hungry. We don't have a personal hunger interest. And some people would say that makes you biased. And that's the real joke here, right? Is that you say you have no hunger, you have no personal interest, and that for you're somehow have a negative bias. And you don't have a negative bias, you just don't have a positive bias. And so now you can recognize that, well, let's analyze this. What is the real value of the pleasure? Is there some other way to derive the pleasure? Is there some other food they could eat? You can always make it that kind of an example, right? Because they have whatever it's called, the blowfish thing. There's some name for when you eat raw blowfish. And it's highly dangerous. If the guy prepares it wrong, the shit's got the poison in it, and you're going to get poisoned. And it's like, you could argue how many people have to die before you say, can't you eat something else? You have to eat blowfish? There's some necessity that you eat blowfish? I mean, you don't have to have knowledge of a strong hunger. You can even understand hunger. You can even understand personal taste. I could say, gee, I can understand that. Let's say I found out potato chips killed 1 in 1,000 potato chip eaters. Well, I'd say, yeah, well, I can eat something else. There's corn chips and there's Doritos and there's all kinds of other shit. Why would I be stupid? Even as a hungry person, I could realize that. Even as somebody being personally attached, I could recognize, oh, gee, that's kind of stupid. But clearly, if I don't have the hunger, it doesn't make me biased against. It just makes it easier for me to be objective and say, well, what are we really talking about here? How necessary is this? Is this the only food source? Is this the only way? Is it really, really difficult to recondition you? I mean, if you're arguing about converting somebody's sexual preference, yeah, that would be hard. You'd have to pay a high price to do that. Reconditioning is incredibly expensive to the individual being reconditioned. It requires, brutal reorientation of your positive and negative reactions on a visceral level, and that requires you to be basically tortured, re-tortured into a new configuration. Because that's basically how life configures you in the first place, is through little moments of torture and moments of reward, the whip and the carrot, the whip and the reward, and you have to redo that extensively to rewrite the conditioned programming. So then you could argue, okay, the price of reorienting this desire is too high for the benefit. And you can do these analysis. But this analysis can be pretty rational. You can understand what's happening, and there's no overt obstacle from us doing this, except that, yeah, it does require some work. You have to think. I mean, you have to recognize certain truths about life to do all these things right. You have to recognize things like you're going to die anyway. Okay, so when people talk about, cigarette smokers or something, it's always kind of silly, because their presumption is the person is going to die of something else eventually, and that somehow the years that they might extend their life are somehow going to be golden. Yeah, without any evidence or proof of that, they just say it. Which is a huge canard. This recognition that, if this doesn't kill you, something else is going to. It's just the truth. You don't escape death. You don't save a life. You prolong a life. See, these little subtle differences in how you describe the reality make a huge difference in how you understand the value. Yeah. I think that's probably... Yeah. I mean, so we're sort of back to this argument again about language and the accuracy of it, and that we should try to mold language into something more accurate. And we shouldn't be using terms like love and spirit and soul and mumbo jumbo. Even the word life, again, kind of a word that everybody is programmed to think of in terms of puffy clouds and butterflies and bumblebees and little happy, smiley facey bullshit, when life is maggots, slow death, suffering, angst, blood, ooze, nasty ook. That's the other half of that reality. And that portion of life is not in the realm of many people's conditioned response to the word life. When they hear the word life, they don't go there. And they certainly don't go there first. And they don't go there in some fair manner. They don't go to the dark side first, or the dark side proportionally. They basically just ignore it and pretend it's all some hugely profitable, free lunch. And life isn't anywhere close to that. And again, when the discussions of ethics and values is about how you proportion, how you dispose the penalties, the price. You gaining at somebody else's expense is kind of a taboo. That's bad mojo. Yeah, we've got to migrate to a world where that becomes less and less possible. And unless you're willing to do that, you really have no business supporting the game. The game has to migrate in that direction. That's the obligation. The obligation is to make you get what you deserve. If you support it, you should pay for it. You shouldn't be immune to your proportion of the risk just because you got lucky. Luck should have nothing to do with it. So anyway, enough said and such. Really quite pretty here, flowers out. Yeah, I'm bringing my flowers over here because they can't grow at my house anymore as the deers. So I have to move them to a safe location where they can grow in peace and such. So anyway, until next time.